Hi everybody, welcome back to Joe's RC Corner, and today we're going to be back on the SIG Colt kit. We're going to go ahead and get these fuselage sides put together with the formers in place, so stay tuned. Okay guys, so we're on the next steps here. So if you remember on the last video, we went ahead and we got the fuselage sides here glued with the doublers and also the stringers that are along the edge here. We also put the Firewall forward doubler on there as well, so that way we can add nice rounded corners to it. And so now the next step was to go ahead and let me find the Firewall that they gave me. I put it down somewhere. There it is. So the original Firewall that they had, it was two 30-second. Actually, it might have been either 3 30-second or 5 16. Let me see here. It is two 3 30-second by 2 3/8 by 3 3/8 plywood, and then they get glued, sandwiched together. But while it was curing, I didn't have additional weight on top of them, so it ended up warping. I'm not sure if it's showing up in the camera well there or not, but you can see that there's a slight warp in that. So I went ahead and I had some 1/4 inch birch ply, and I went ahead and cut out a new Firewall for this aircraft using the birch ply. So basically just laid them on top of each other, and we got it cut out, sanded, so now it's the same as you can see there. Okay, so we're going to use that instead. So the next step is to mark where the motor mount, the center, is going to be for the thrust line. And then we're going to mount and put the motor mount for the electric motor on there, and I'm going to put in the blind nuts so that part is ready to go. So it makes it a lot easier down the road to go ahead and pull that motor off, put a new one on, and so on. So we're going to do that. We're also going to add the blind nuts for the nose gear, because the nose gear also gets attached to this. So we're going to go ahead and get those blind nuts in there and drill out those spots for that. So stay tuned, we're going to keep going here. And the motor that we're going to put on here is a 2835. I believe it's a 1250 kV prop drive from Hobby King. Seems to be a pretty nice motor. I will be cutting the shaft off of this because it's not going to be behind the Firewall. We're going to be mounting it this way with the prop drive on the front, like so. So one of the things that I want to take a look at while I have this all out is I want to see if I'm going to have to add any spacers, anything of that sort on there. So we'll take a quick look. So if that goes on here like so, and that will go there. So it looks like maybe a little bit, may need to, may need to make a little bit of a spacer. What I'll do later is I have wooden dowel that I will cut in order to extend that out just a little bit. And that should be fine. That'll give me the prop clearance right there. Okay, so nonetheless, we're going to find the center line, the center thrust line here, and we're going to mark where the holes need to be for the motor. So let's go ahead and go do that next. And if you see here, they have full-size cross sections of the Firewall right here. And then what we'll do is we'll take that and we'll lay it on top, and I'm going to extend these lines so I can put marks on the firewall and then transfer those lines onto that. So I'm going to set all this stuff aside here. Bring my camera in a little bit closer so you can see what I'm doing here. Okay, so now as you can see, the marks are on here. So you have the cross section there and a cross section here. I'm going to take my straight edge, I'm going to line it up on that. And I'm going to transfer that line a little bit further. Like so. And then the same thing on the other side here for the north and south. So now when I take this firewall and I lay it on top and I line up all the corners, and I'll transfer those lines right across. So I line up my pen marks with the outer edge of the ruler. Now I have that cross section. Okay, so now that we've gotten the cross sections transferred from here, we're going to go ahead and kind of line everything up and then mark where these items need to be placed. So this is going to be top now, so we're going to put an arrow up here. So that's up, and then the lines are forward. Okay, so we line this up in here. Should be right on that center line. And it looks like it goes just a bit, almost down to the bottom. We're going to transfer those lines. So we're going to line it up again. So you can see that on here. We're going to line it up. To where we want it. Transfer the holes. And the first two. I'm going to line those up again. Okay, so those are the holes for the landing gear. So we'll end up drilling those out. And then the next set of holes we're going to do for the motor mount. So let me grab the motor mount again. Should be right here. There it is. We're going to center that on there so that the hole is right there in the middle. And mark these holes as well. Oh, they moved. Make sure we're good and centered still. Okay, so now we have these marked as well. And I'm also going to have to mark this center section because this motor has that shaft coming out the back. And it's going to have to go through that hole there. So we're going to go ahead and take this over to the drill press and put those holes in there. So stay tuned, guys. Okay, so we got these all drilled out now. We're going to double check the size for these bolts as well. Okay, so after we finished all of the holes here, we're going to go ahead and open up the holes a little bit so that way the blind nuts can pass through and actually fit in there. It says to open the holes up with the 9/64, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I have my drill bit here. I'm going to take it back over to the drill press, and we'll go ahead and fix these holes up a little bit wider. Actually, I may just go ahead and grab my hand drill, and do these since the holes are already there. And we're just opening the holes up, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, and we'll need a hammer. I have a little hammer I like to use for these types of things. Right here. I'm going to use the old block here. All right, so now we got all the blind nuts in place, landing gear, motor mount. So those all line up. Grab the now those line up. Perfect. All right, so we'll set this off to the side. We're done with this for right now. And we'll put all the rest of these tools back in here. We're not going to be using those motor mounts, since we're not using that. Okay. So, now that this is ready, we're going to put a little bit of epoxy around each one of these mounts here, where the blind nut is, just to give it a little extra support where those mount, so that way, when we tighten things up, they won't loosen up in there. So, let me go ahead and grab the epoxy. We'll get that done too. Okay, so the scale of the paper here is not the same because of the way it was printed out, which is not a big deal. We're going to go ahead and pinch things together and sand things the way they're supposed to be. So on the ends, we do have to take off a little bit here, basically to close in the two tail sections. So we're going to go ahead and do that first, and we're going to use a regular sandpaper for that. So I'm going to take the fuselage side, and I'm just going to go ahead and sand this down. Alright, so now that way when these two ends are pulled together, they'll be able to pull together on that angle. Okay? Just like so. So that part's done. Oop, there we go. We'll get this all put back here. Okay, so now that we have those two sections, my next steps that I'm going to be taking, we got the two formers here that we're going to go ahead and get standing up and straight on here. So we got F3 and F2. So F3 will go at this end, and F2 goes at this end. Right? Like so, and like so. Now these two pieces need to be square, so we're going to go ahead and just read the book here and double check on what it says. So here we are. So we got the two sides, we did that part. Okay, that part's done. Now we're on here. All right, so key plywood parts. Pin the fuselage sides over the top view of the drawn. F2, F3, use the clamps to mask off and hold the pieces until dry. All right, so these two pieces and the firewall need to be square. So we will go ahead and we will look at how these are going to fit, number one. So they got a bit of a gap. They have a little bit of a gap here that we're going to have to take care of. Okay, so now we have these side formers and they fit right along in here. We're going to double check to make sure that they fit properly, because it looks like right now when I put this former in, we have a little bit of a gap right here, and that gap needs to be filled, or these edges need to be sanded. So we're going to sand these down to meet those properly. I'm going to verify that on the other side as well, see if this one also. Yeah, that one also is going to need to have a little bit of sand there. So let's get the sanding block here, and we're just going to go right back and forth on here. Check it again. There we go, now that's touching. Now let's check this side. And that also needs the sanding, so let's go ahead and on that too. All right, now that one fits flush. So we're going to go ahead and get this one glued in place on this side first, and we'll use some medium CA for that. Okay, so I got the medium CA, same brand as before, BSI. Okay, and we're going to double check this one again, make sure we have it in the right orientation, and also verify that we're in the right spot. So right here, it should meet right up against this back half here. So we're going to add a little bit of medium CA on here. Line it up with the spots we have, and then press and hold. We want to make sure this is 90 degrees. Get your square out. Hold that in place. And we're square, okay? And we're going to do the same thing with the other one here. So as we saw before, it was a little bit high. So we'll go ahead and sand that edge here on this side. And again, very good. Right there, perfect, okay. So we'll go ahead and we'll square this one up and glue it on this side as well. So again, the corner. And right along the edge here. Just that side. Line it up for here. And again, make sure we're squared up. Okay. Okay. Now let's check on that firewall. All right, so the epoxy's all cured now, as you can see. So that's all good to go. Glue these sides together. So that is the next step. Let's see how everything lines up here. Okay, so we have the two sides here. We're going to do the two square edges first, okay, because we know that these have to be square with the fuselage. And then what we'll do is we'll put this in place, making sure this is square, and then we can squeeze this inward. Make sure it's straight. And then we'll concentrate on the back half after that. So first things first, let's get this glued together this way first. We're going to do one at a time, and we're going to double check that we're square. We're going to, again, double check that we're square. Okay? Because when you glue one section at a time, you have room to correct. So we're going to start with the back half first, glued to this section here. Once we know that is square and glued properly, we will then go with this section and glue that one in place. Make sure that's nice and square. Then we can set it up on edge and make sure that this is in there properly, and then meet those two halves together, and we'll use some elastics and we'll make sure that's all lined up. So let's go ahead and start doing that next. We'll get this side in first. Okay, so we have the fuselage sides now together with the formers in the center. I'm not going to glue the tail section together yet. I want to go ahead and get the front firewall former in place first. I'm going to grab my clamps and we'll clamp this in place, pinching it together, and we'll put the 30-minute epoxy on there to go ahead and get that glued in place. So let me go ahead and get my 30-minute epoxy and some mixing cups, and we'll get that started. Okay, so now I have the motor mount here in place. We got my 30-minute epoxy. We're going to clear off a little bit of space here. I also have some alcohol nearby in a spray bottle that will allow me to make any cleanup very easily. So we'll get this all out of the way. Got my large clamp, which I'll be able to put over the top here. And this one clamp should pretty much do all of it, but I do have one small clamp just in case. So with that, let's go ahead and mix up some 30-minute epoxy. I want to go ahead and just check how everything fits in here first. So I'm going to lay this down inside, flush with the top. And let's go ahead and clamp that just to see how it all looks. Make sure everything's lining up nicely here in a dry fit. Because once the epoxy's in, she's good. Try this again here and get that lined up a little better. Okay. All right, so that'll look good for the top. Looks like I will need to use this one on the bottom here to see if that'll squeeze in that bottom section nicely. And that'll work great. So that'll hold that all nicely together. Let's take a look here, make sure everything is straight. Firewall is straight. It's looking pretty good, so we'll go ahead and we'll start with that. So, we'll go ahead and loosen these up. Okay, so we are ready to start adding the epoxy here. So we're going to go ahead and mix some of this up. And again, using this stuff is the Great Plains 30-minute epoxy. Got that back up. Got that back up. Okay, there's my mixing stick. We'll go ahead and get this mixed. Okay. I'm going to slide a little bit on the edges here of this as well. Okay, set the cup aside. Okay, so now we have some epoxy on both ledges that are going to be touching the inside of this area here. And we got epoxy lined up inside there as well. So I'm going to go ahead and take this piece and I'm going to slide it down inside here. And then pull the two edges together. It's going to ooze out, which is fine. Let me take my clamp. Okay, on that top side, flip it over. And we'll take the clamp on the bottom side here and squeeze that section together as well. And get a paper towel, some alcohol on it here. Clean that off of there. Actually, let me clean that off first. I don't want any epoxy on this. Clean up this section here. I want to shove that down as far as I can, away from the joint. Okay, so we have the fuselage pieces, two halves together. The firewall is now glued, epoxied in place. We're going to let that cure. It's got a 30-minute epoxy, so we'll give that 30 minutes to fully cure. I have it clamped together to hold its shape while that happens. And then once this portion is done, then we'll take a look at gluing the tail section together. I have it pinned or clamped together right now just to hold it in place until we get to the stage where we start adding the sheet in here to hold it all together, and then we'll go from there. Now there are a few other pieces that are going to have to go in between the fuselage halves, so I'm going to have to glue in. There's a piece here on either side, and let's see, once that's clamped together with those extra formers in there, so there's a little bit more, a couple pieces of the 1/4 inch that goes in there at each one of these points. And then we'll start gluing these edges together and then sheet it, and that'll be nice and strong. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be back once the epoxy is cured on the firewall.